In the last few decades, there's been a definite move away from chemical inputs towards safer inputs for agricultural use, particularly for crop protection. This has resulted in a flood of research and bioproducts on the market, causing confusion amongst producers and not knowing which products are genuine and which are not. So the bioproducts can be divided very broadly into two groups: the biostimulants and the biopesticides. A biostimulant, in a broad sense, is defined as an organism or a derived product from a natural organism which is used for the improvement of plant growth. A biopesticide is usually a natural organism or a derivative from a natural organism which is used for the control of a particular pest or disease. A biostimulant can be registered as both a biostimulant and a biopesticide, but then it requires two registration numbers. By law, all agricultural inputs have to be registered, and the particular law which plays a role here is Act 36 of 1947. When we refer to the biostimulants and the biopesticides, in particular the biopesticides, it is a law which was passed in 2015. It's the Biological Guidelines of Pesticides, and that is changing continuously. They've now divided or split it into microbials and macrobials. Macrobials refers to the arthropods like parasitoids and wasps, and the microbial guidelines are used for any fungi, bacteria, nematodes or viruses or something similar to that. So registration requires a label with very strict rules which have to be adhered to. A biopesticide as an agricultural input requires a registration and will receive an L registration number. The range of pests and pathogens which will be used must be on the label. It must have the genus name, it must have the species name, and it must also have, in some cases, a strain number. The range of crops against which the product is to be used must also be mentioned on the label. The concentration of the active ingredient is to be listed. There will also always be a batch number and an expiry date by law. In the case of a biostimulant, it also receives a registration number, but this number starts with an M. The ones previously or prior to 2019 would have had a B number, and they fall under the fertilizer group 3. Biofertilizers also have to have or list the active ingredient, again, the genus name and species name of all the organisms, if there are organisms in the biostimulant, have to be mentioned, as well as the shelf life and the content. So, if a crop protection advisor or a salesman arrives with a package on the farm, the things to look out for are, as I mentioned, but particularly, does it have an L or an M number? Is it a biostimulant or is it a biopesticide? Is the active ingredient listed? It must have the genus and the species name, and where possible, a strain number is to be included. The content of spores or nematodes or whatever it is, that has to be listed. It must have a batch number and it must have an expiry date as well. And it must also say what it does. Is it to improve plant growth or is it to control something? In other words, it must make a claim. In addition, anybody selling agricultural inputs must be registered with IFCASA. So ask for the IFCASA number. Amongst the many requirements for the registration of a biopesticide include the efficacy data, which is for the Department of Agriculture. That is at least 2 years' work in 2 seasons in 4 sites. Then, in addition, you need what we call the 6-pack from the Department of Health, where they look at, amongst others, skin irritants, eye irritants, various health aspects of the product. You are required to get a permit from the Department of Agriculture for mass release of an organism. You are also required to, if you are mass multiplying the organism, you have to get a permit from DTI for the mass proliferation of a non-warfare organism. In addition to all of this, the NEMBA Act from the Department of Environmental Affairs is also applicable. So any organism that you have taken out of the soil in which you have multiplied, you require a bioprospecting permit. Any organism which is imported must have an import permit, and this is done through the Department of Agriculture. So all of these are fairly rigorous, and then once the efficacy data, the dossier has been handed in, it takes at least 417 days before a product is registered and receives an L number. It is very important to know that any organism which is imported, no matter from where, and even if it is registered in the country overseas, it has to go through the rigorous regulations. It must be tested for efficacy, and it also has to go through the various Department of Health regulations. A very important aspect I want to mention is that the biodiversity in South Africa is unique, particularly in the Western Cape. We have to preserve it. And for this reason, any imported product has to go through a pest risk analysis, particularly if there is no similar organism found in the Western Cape. And for that reason, an import permit is required. What is very important, and that we must remember at all times, we are referring to food safety. Whatever agricultural input is used, it must go through the rigorous tests which the registrar requires.